The splintered end of the broken broom handle felt like an extension of her own bones. Zara's knuckles were white, the only color in the grip that had long since lost all feeling. A thin crimson line snaked down her forearm from a shallow graze, the blood stark against her dark skin and the deep green of her nurse's scrubs. It was the only wound that showed. The others, the ones carved into her soul over 25 years of a hard life, were invisible. They were also the source of the fire burning in her eyes, a defiant inferno against the three masked men circling her. Behind her, a frail 70-year-old woman in a beige dress trembled violently, clutching the back of Zara's scrubs like a frightened child hiding from thunder. Her breath came in short bursts of panic. "Gamsaneda, please," the woman whispered in Korean. Suwon-hae Park. Her voice trembled like fragile birdsong inside the sudden violent silence of the street. The thugs had been fast. Too fast. A screech of tires. A van door slamming open. Black masks. The glint of pistols. 30 seconds. That was all it had taken for the peaceful street to turn into a hunting ground. But they hadn't counted on her. They never did. They looked at Zara and saw a nurse, a civilian, an inconvenience, an obstacle to brush aside. They didn't see the girl who had learned to survive in alleyways, where mercy was a luxury nobody could afford. They didn't see the teenager who had fought men twice her size to protect a brother who no longer spoke to her. They didn't see the woman who had sworn an oath in blood and tears that she would never again stand by while the strong preyed on the weak. One of the men stepped forward. He was clearly the leader. His pistol hung casually in his hand. His eyes were cold slits above the mask. "Move," he said. His voice was flat. "This isn't your business." Zara's breath rasped in her throat. Her sneakers scraped softly against the asphalt as she shifted her weight. The broom handle in her hand was her only weapon. 5 feet of rough wood, one jagged splintered end, a piece of trash turned into a spear. She didn't speak. Her answer was in the tightening of her jaw, in the rigid line of her shoulders. She would not move. She would not step aside. She would break before she bent. The men didn't know it yet. Standing there on that sun-drenched pavement. But this moment, this impossible act of stubborn courage, was a stone thrown into the calm waters of the city's underworld. The ripples would travel farther than anyone imagined. They would reshape alliances, start wars, destroy empires, and give Zara something she had never possessed before. A name, a place, a family. But all of that would come later. For now, there was only the street, only the gun, only the choice. And the choice had already been made. 12 hours earlier, the world had been gray, muted, quiet. Zara's apartment was barely large enough to deserve the word. 4 walls, a narrow bed, a single table, a tiny kitchenette that smelled faintly of bleach and old coffee. The pre-dawn light filtered weakly through a dirty window. Dust floated lazily through the air. Zara sat at the table eating oatmeal. Plain, no sugar, no milk, just oats and hot water. Her movements were efficient, careful, every action measured. Years of exhaustion had trained her body to conserve energy the way desert animals conserve water. Her dark green scrubs were already on, clean, pressed, but faded from endless washing. They were less a uniform now and more a second skin. She rubbed her face slowly. Her palm felt rough against the sharp bones of her cheeks. The reflection in the window stared back at her, a ghost of a woman, 25 years old, eyes that looked 40. A faint silver scar ran from her temple into her hairline, usually hidden. Today it caught the light, a souvenir from a life she tried very hard to forget. Her phone buzzed on the table. 6:03 a.m. Another shift, another day, another 12 hours of helping people who were slowly dying. She finished the oatmeal, washed the bowl, grabbed her bag, and stepped out into the morning cold. The facility, the long-term care facility, smelled exactly the way every such place smells. Antiseptic, plastic, medicine, and a quiet, lingering scent of fading life. Zara moved through the halls with silent efficiency. She changed dressings, checked vitals, adjusted oxygen lines, held the hands of patients who had no one left. Her co-workers often mistook her silence for coldness. But it wasn't. It was protection. Because carrying too much in a place like this would break a person. Zara understood pain. She understood fear. She understood the long, slow erosion of hope. And that understanding made her good at the job. But she never let anyone close. Not the nurses. Not the doctors. Not the patients' families. She came. She worked. She left. That was the deal she had made with the world. Across the city, high above the skyline, another morning began. Glass walls, marble floors, silence. Jinwoo Park stood before a floor-to-ceiling window. The city spread below him like a living machine. Millions of lives moving. Millions of choices being made. Millions of secrets. He controlled more of them than anyone realized. His suit was immaculate, dark silk, perfectly tailored. His reflection in the glass looked less like a man and more like a statue carved from shadow. Behind him the door opened quietly. Jinwoo. He turned. His mother stood there. Sunhae Park. She carried a small tray with a porcelain teacup, barley tea. Her silver hair was tied neatly at the back of her neck. Her beige dress simple but elegant. Time had added lines to her face, but had not taken away her warmth. "You work too hard," she said softly. He accepted the tea. "There is much to do." She smiled gently. There was something deeply ironic about the scene. The most feared crime lord in the city, being scolded by his mother. For a brief moment the ruthless king vanished, leaving behind only a son. Somewhere else, in a rusted warehouse near the docks, Victor Orloff laughed. The sound echoed off the steel walls. Ugly, loud, drunken, he sprawled on a leather couch holding a bottle of vodka. His men stood around him. They were nervous, because Victor Orloff was dangerous when he was sober, but he was unpredictable when he drank. "So," Victor growled, "the great Jinwoo Park." He took another drink. "He thinks he owns the city." Nobody spoke. Victor slammed the bottle onto a crate. Glass cracked. But every king has a weakness. He grinned, gold teeth glinting. "Family," one of his lieutenants shifted uncomfortably. "You mean?" Victor leaned forward. "His mother." The room fell silent. Even criminals understood that some lines were dangerous. Victor didn't care. "We take her," he said. "Then we take everything." Afternoon. The city market was alive with sound. Vendors shouting. Children laughing. Music playing from somewhere unseen. Zara walked slowly down the sidewalk. Her shift had ended early. Something that almost never happened. She didn't know what to do with the extra time. Freedom felt strange. Uncomfortable. Her messenger bag hung over her shoulder. Inside was a half-eaten sandwich and a paperback novel she hadn't opened in weeks. The world around her felt bright, loud, alive. She felt like a shadow moving through it. Across the street, Sunhae Park smiled as she looked at a flower stall. Her bodyguard stood nearby. She turned to them. "Wait here," she said gently. "Just 2 minutes." They hesitated, but she insisted. Finally they stepped back, and she walked alone down the quiet side street. The moment everything changed. Zara saw the elderly woman approaching from the opposite direction. There was something peaceful about her, graceful, kind, the kind of face people trust immediately. Zara looked away. Just another stranger passing by. Then, tires screamed. A black van swerved into the street. The side door slammed open. 3 masked men jumped out. Everything exploded into chaos. People screamed. Someone dropped a crate of oranges. They rolled across the pavement. One thug grabbed the old woman. She cried out, and the sound hit Zara like a hammer, because it was a sound she had heard before, 15 years ago, in a dark apartment. Her brother screaming, her stepfather raging, and her standing frozen, doing nothing, running away, leaving him behind. "No!" Zara whispered. "Not this time. Not again." Her eyes snapped at the broom leaning against the wall. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. She grabbed the handle, smashed the brush against a brick. Crack! The head snapped off. Now she held a jagged wooden staff. 5 feet of rough wood. She turned. The men were dragging the old woman toward the van. "Leave her alone." Her voice ripped through the street like thunder. The men turned. They saw a nurse, holding a stick, and they laughed. Zara didn't. She charged. Zara charged. The distance between her and the kidnappers closed in seconds. Her sneakers slapped against the pavement as adrenaline flooded her body, turning fear into raw momentum. The man holding Suinhei Park barely had time to react. He had expected panic, screaming, maybe someone calling the police. He had not expected a nurse with a weaponized broom handle sprinting straight at him like a missile. The leader barked a curse. Stop her. But it was already too late. Zara swung the wooden staff with both hands. She didn't aim for the man's body. She aimed for the hands gripping the old woman. Crack! The staff smashed against the thug's wrist. The sound was sickening. Bone meeting hardwood. The man screamed and released Suinhei instantly, his pistol falling to the ground. The old woman stumbled backward. Zara stepped in front of her without thinking. One thug lunged forward. He tried to grab Zara's arm. She pivoted. Her body remembered movements she hadn't used in years. Instincts learned from street fights and desperate survival. The splintered end of the staff drove forward like a spear. It punched into the man's thigh. He howled and collapsed. Now only the leader remained standing. He was furious. His pistol came up instantly. "Drop it," he shouted. Zara didn't. Her chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. Her eyes were locked onto his. Suinhei clung to Zara's back, trembling violently. "Move aside," the thug said coldly. Zara's answer was silence. The leader's finger tightened on the trigger. Bang! The gunshot exploded through the quiet street. Pain tore across Zara's arm. She staggered slightly. Blood blossomed across her sleeve, but she didn't fall. She didn't even step back. Instead, she lifted the staff again. The splintered end pointed directly at the man's throat. The thug blinked in disbelief. "Are you insane?" he snarled. Maybe she was, because Zara realized something in that moment. She wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had ruled her life for years. Fear of failure, fear of the past, fear of losing people. But now there was only one truth burning through her mind. Not again. She would not watch another innocent person get hurt. Not while she was standing there. Even if it killed her. The arrival. The standoff lasted 10 seconds. But it felt like hours. The thug's pistol remained trained on Zara's chest. Her staff remained aimed at his throat. Neither moved. Then, a new sound filled the street. Low, deep, growing louder. Engines. Powerful engines. At the end of the road, 3 black SUVs roared into view. They stopped with violent precision. Doors flew open. Men stepped out. 6 of them. Dark suits. Cold eyes. Suppressors attached to sleek black pistols. The atmosphere changed instantly. Even the thug holding the gun felt it, because he recognized those cars. He recognized the men. And that meant only one thing. Gene Woo Park. The leader cursed under his breath. This wasn't supposed to happen. The rear door of the first SUV opened. A man stepped out. Tall. Perfect posture. Dark suit. Immaculate. Gene Woo Park moved slowly down the street. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply walked. And the air seemed to shift around him. His gaze scanned the scene. First the injured thugs. Then the broken broom handle. Then the nurse standing between his mother and a gun. For the briefest moment, emotion flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. He stopped 10 feet away. "Kong," he said calmly. His lieutenant stepped forward. "Yes, sir." Gene Woo spoke only 2 words. "End this." The execution. Everything happened in seconds. 2 of Gene Woo's men rushed forward. They disarmed the thug instantly. The pistol clattered across the pavement. Another man pinned him to the ground. The thug struggled wildly. "You can't do this," he shouted. Gene Woo watched silently. Then the thug made a fatal mistake. He twisted suddenly. His hand reached for a hidden knife. A soft, suppressed gunshot echoed. Puff! A dark hole appeared in the center of his forehead. The thug collapsed instantly, dead before his body hit the ground. The remaining attackers were dragged toward the SUVs. They would not see daylight again. The street fell silent. People who had been hiding slowly returned. But Jean Woo's men were already moving, cleaning the scene, removing evidence. Within minutes, it looked like nothing had happened. The mother, Suin-hye Park, rushed forward. She grabbed Zara's hands. "Oh, my dear child." Her voice trembled with emotion. "You saved me." Zara looked confused, still breathing heavily, still holding the broken staff. I just reacted," she said quietly. Suin-hye shook her head. "No." Her eyes were full of gratitude. "You chose courage." An ambulance arrived. Paramedics began cleaning Zara's wound. The bullet had grazed her arm. Painful, but not life-threatening. Zara barely noticed, because someone else had stepped closer. Jean Woo Park, the crime king's offer. He stood only a few feet away. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Tall, still, his dark eyes studied her carefully. Not with gratitude, not with kindness, with calculation. "You attacked armed men with a broom," he said calmly. Zara shrugged weakly. It was the only thing nearby. His expression didn't change. "You could have died." "I know." "Why didn't you run?" Zara hesitated. Her answer came quietly. "Because I did that once." Jean Woo noticed something in her voice. Regret. Old pain. He studied her more closely. "You have training." "Not really. You fight like someone who has survived violence." Zara didn't answer. Jean Woo nodded slowly. Then he said something unexpected. "My mother's life cannot be repaid with money." Zara blinked. "I wasn't expecting anything." "I know." He stepped closer and lowered his voice. "I'm offering you something else." She frowned. "What?" Jean Woo gestured toward the city skyline. "A purpose." Zara stared at him. He continued calmly. "You have nothing tying you to this world. You live alone. You work yourself into exhaustion. You carry pain like armor." Zara stiffened. "How do you know that?" Jean Woo didn't answer. Instead, he said, "My mother needs protection. Not bodyguards who stand 10 feet away. Someone who stands beside her. Someone who will fight if necessary." His gaze locked onto hers. "You." Zara shook her head immediately. "You're serious?" "Completely. You're asking a nurse to work for a crime lord. I'm asking a warrior to protect my family." The words hit her like a shock. Warrior. No one had ever called her that. Ever. Jean Woo extended his hand slightly. Not to shake, but to offer. "Come with us. Leave the past behind. Fight for something that matters." Zara looked at Suin-hye. The old woman's eyes were warm. Kind. Hopeful. For the first time in years, Zara felt something unfamiliar inside her chest. Belonging. A new life begins. 3 weeks later, Zara stood on a wide balcony overlooking the city. Wind moved gently through the garden below. She no longer wore green scrubs. Instead, she wore black training clothes. Comfortable, flexible, designed for movement. In her hands was a staff, but not a broken broom handle. This one was made from polished ironwood, perfectly balanced. Heavy, deadly, a gift from Jean Woo. Her training had begun immediately. Every morning at sunrise, she trained with an old martial arts master who lived on the estate. Master Han, a quiet man with sharp eyes and impossible speed. "You fight with anger," he told her one day. Zara wiped sweat from her forehead. "It works." He shook his head. "Anger burns quickly. Discipline lasts forever." Under his guidance, she learned control. Footwork, timing, precision. Her raw street fighting instinct slowly transformed into refined combat skill. By the end of the second week, even Jean Woo's security team stopped underestimating her. The bond. Afternoons were spent with Suin-hye. The old woman refused to treat Zara like an employee. Instead, she insisted they walk together through the gardens, drink tea, read poetry. "Family is not always blood," Suin-hye told her one evening. "Sometimes it is the people who choose to stand beside you." Zara didn't know how to respond, but slowly her walls began to crack. The estate no longer felt like a prison. It felt like home. The crime king watches. Jean Woo rarely spoke to Zara directly, but he watched. often from a distance, observing her training, analyzing her progress. One night, Kong approached her after practice. He handed her a tablet. A news report played. A headline flashed across the screen. Russian crime boss found dead. Viktor Orlov, shot multiple times. His empire collapsing overnight. Zara looked at Kong. You did this. Kong shrugged slightly. Mr. Park pays his debts. Zara stared at the screen, realizing something important. Saving Suin-hei had changed everything. Not just for her, for the entire underworld. The first time Zara knocked one of Jin Woo's elite bodyguards to the floor, the entire training hall fell silent. It happened 3 weeks after she arrived at the estate. The gymnasium was enormous, larger than most public fitness centers, lined with polished wooden floors, mirrored walls, and racks of weapons used for training. Staffs, training swords, weighted batons, even firearms for tactical drills. Master Han stood near the center of the room, watching with calm, patient eyes. Zara held the ironwood staff Jin Woo had given her. Across from her stood one of the estate's professional guards. His name was June. He had worked security for nearly 10 years. Tall, muscular, confident, and extremely annoyed. Mr. Park wants you tested, June said. His tone carried a faint edge of amusement. You sure you're ready for that? Zara rolled her shoulders slowly. I guess we'll find out. June smirked. The other guards watched from the sidelines. To them, Zara was still an outsider, a nurse who had gotten lucky on a street fight. Now she was standing in their training room, holding a staff like she belonged there. June moved first. He rushed forward with a fast strike aimed at her ribs. Zara pivoted. The movement was instinctive now. Weeks of training had sharpened her reactions. Her staff snapped up and deflected his strike. Crack! Wood met wood. June blinked. That wasn't supposed to happen. He attacked again. Faster this time. Zara stepped sideways. Her staff spun. The polished ironwood struck his knee. Not hard enough to injure, but enough to unbalance him. June stumbled. In that split second, Zara moved. The staff swept upward and hooked behind his ankle. She pulled. June hit the ground with a loud thud. Silence filled the room. June stared up at the ceiling in disbelief. Zara lowered the staff. Her breathing was steady. Master Han smiled faintly. Good. June sat up slowly. Well, he muttered, that's embarrassing. The other guards burst into laughter. That was the moment everything changed. From that day forward, they stopped seeing Zara as a nurse. They started seeing her as something else. The crime king's interest. Jin Woo watched the sparring match through a glass wall above the training floor. His office overlooked the gym. He had seen every movement, every reaction. Kong stood beside him. She's improving quickly, Kong said. Jin Woo nodded slightly. Yes. She learns faster than expected. Kong studied Zara below. You trust her? Jin Woo's answer came immediately. No. Then he added quietly. But I respect her. Respect was something Jin Woo rarely gave. Zara had earned it. The first assignment. 2 months later, Suin-hei Park attended a charity event downtown. A quiet cultural fundraiser. Art, music, wealthy donors. The type of event where powerful people pretended the city had no darkness. Zara stood beside Suin-hei near the entrance. She wore a simple black suit, her hair tied back neatly. From the outside, she looked like any professional bodyguard. But beneath the calm surface, her senses were constantly alert. Master Han had drilled it into her mind. Violence always announces itself, he told her. You just have to notice the whisper before the scream. Zara scanned the crowd. Something felt wrong. She couldn't explain it, but the tension in the room felt slightly off. Her eyes moved across the guests. Waiters, security, politicians. Then she saw him, a man near the back door. He wore a catering uniform, but he wasn't carrying food. He was watching Suin-hei. Too closely, too carefully. Zara stepped slightly in front of Suin-hei. Stay behind me, she whispered. Suin-hei blinked. What is it? Zara didn't answer, because the man suddenly reached inside his jacket. Zara moved instantly. She grabbed Suin-hei and pushed her down behind a table. The man pulled out a pistol. But before he could raise it, Zara was already moving. She grabbed a serving tray from a nearby table and hurled it across the room. The metal tray smashed into the man's face. His gun fired into the ceiling. Guests screamed. Chaos erupted. Zara sprinted forward. The attacker recovered quickly. He swung his pistol toward her. Too slow. Zara slammed into him. Her elbow crashed into his throat. He gagged. She twisted his wrist violently. The gun dropped. Security guards rushed forward. Within seconds, the attacker was pinned to the floor. The room was silent, except for the sound of frightened breathing. Zara turned. Suin-hye was unharmed. But someone else had been watching the entire incident. Jin-woo Park. He stepped forward slowly. His eyes were locked on Zara. "You sensed him," he said. Zara nodded. "Yes." "How?" "I don't know." Jin-woo looked impressed. "That instinct cannot be taught." He turned to Kong. "Find out who sent him." Kong nodded. "Yes, sir." The enemy returns. Later that night, Kong entered Jin-woo's office. The lights of the city glowed behind him. "We interrogated the attacker," Kong said, "and he worked for a surviving member of Victor Orloff's organization." Jin-woo's expression hardened slightly. "A revenge attempt." "Yes." Kong paused. "But there is something else." Jin-woo waited. Kong continued. "There is a new group entering the city. Chinese. Highly organized. They believe Orloff's death left a power vacuum." Jin-woo's eyes grew cold. "They are mistaken." The warning. 2 days later, Zara finished her training session in the gym. Sweat dripped from her hair. Master Han watched silently. "You fight differently now," he said. "How?" "You are no longer fighting for survival." Zara leaned against the wall. "What am I fighting for then?" Master Han looked toward the garden where Suin-hye often walked. "You fight for others." That night, Kong approached Zara. "We need you," he said. "For what?" "There has been movement in the docks." Zara frowned. "You mean crime movement?" Kong nodded. "Yes." Zara sighed. "So the quiet part of this job is officially over." Kong gave a faint smile. "Yes." The docks. Midnight. Cold wind blew across the shipping docks. Cargo containers towered like steel walls. Zara crouched behind one with 3 of Jin-woo's men. Her ironwood staff rested across her knees. Kong whispered into a radio. "Target incoming." Headlights appeared in the distance. 3 trucks rolled slowly into the yard. Zara's heart beat faster, not from fear, from anticipation. For the first time, she wasn't reacting to violence. She was stepping into it willingly. The truck stopped. Men stepped out, armed, dangerous. Kong whispered one word. "Move." Jin-woo's team emerged from the shadows. The confrontation exploded instantly. Gunfire echoed across the docks. Men shouted. Zara sprinted forward. One attacker raised a pistol. Her staff smashed into his wrist. The gun flew away. Another lunged at her. She spun. The ironwood staff cracked against his ribs. He collapsed. For several minutes, chaos ruled the dockyard. Then, silence. The attackers had been defeated. Zara stood in the center of the yard, breathing heavily, her staff resting on the ground. Kong approached. "You did well." Zara looked around. She realized something important. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the victim of violence. She was the one standing at the end of it. The crime king's decision. Later that night, Jin-woo summoned Zara to his office. She entered quietly. He stood by the window, as usual. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. "Thank you." Jin-woo turned toward her. "Do you regret joining us?" Zara thought for a moment. "No." "Why?" She answered honestly. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Jin-woo studied her carefully. Then he said something unexpected. "The war for the city is about to begin." Zara raised an eyebrow. "And—" He stepped closer. "And you are no longer just my mother's guardian. You are part of this family now." Rain fell over the city like a curtain of silver, cold, relentless. The streets glistened beneath the neon glow of late-night signs and distant traffic lights. From the balcony of the Park Estate, Zara watched the storm silently. The ironwood staff rested against the railing beside her. 3 months ago, she had been a nurse living in a cramped apartment. 3 months ago, the world had been small, quiet, gray. Now, she stood in the center of a storm that ruled the city's shadows. Behind her, the sliding glass door opened quietly. Suin-hye Park stepped onto the balcony. "You should sleep," the older woman said gently. Zara smiled faintly. "I will." Suin-hye joined her at the railing. The two women stood in comfortable silence for a moment. "You are worried," Suin-hye said. Zara glanced sideways. "Is it that obvious?" Suin-hye nodded. "A mother sees many things." Zara looked back at the rain. Kong's report earlier that evening echoed in her mind. The Chinese syndicate had finally made their move. 3 warehouses attacked. 2 of Jean Woo's businesses sabotaged. And most importantly, they had begun targeting people. Not assets, not shipments. People. The kind of war that left blood in the streets. Suin-hye placed a gentle hand on Zara's arm. "You protect my son as much as you protect me," she said quietly. Zara shook her head. "He protects everyone." Suin-hye smiled softly. "He thinks he does." She studied Zara carefully. "But he trusts you." That was something Zara still struggled to understand. Jean Woo Park trusted almost no one. Yet somehow she had become part of the small circle standing closest to him. And tonight, that trust would be tested. The message. The call came at 1:17 a.m. Kong entered the living room with urgency in his steps. "Sir." Jean Woo looked up from his desk. "What is it?" Kong placed a tablet on the table. A video played. It was grainy security footage from one of the city's underground parking garages. A group of armed men stood beside a black SUV. One of them stepped forward. He spoke directly into the camera. "You killed Victor Orloff," the man said in Mandarin. "Now the city belongs to us." Behind him, 2 of Jean Woo's captured men knelt on the floor, bound, bruised. Then the screen went black. The room fell silent. Jean Woo leaned back slowly in his chair. His face was calm. But Zara had learned enough to recognize the dangerous stillness in his posture. "What do we know about them?" Jean Woo asked. Kong answered immediately. "Their leader is Li Cheng, former military. Highly disciplined. Very well funded." Jean Woo nodded once. "And their objective? They want control of the Port Authority." Zara felt a chill. That was the same territory Victor Orloff had tried to seize before he died. But these enemies were different. They were organized, strategic, patient. Jean Woo stood up. "Prepare the teams." Kong nodded. "Yes, sir." Zara spoke. "What's the plan?" Jean Woo looked at her. "We end the war before it begins." The trap. 2 nights later, the abandoned shipping terminal stood silent beneath the moon. Rows of empty cargo containers stretched into darkness. Wind whistled through broken windows. It was the perfect place for an ambush, which was exactly why Jean Woo had chosen it. Zara crouched behind a steel container with Kong and 4 armed guards. Her ironwood staff rested in her hands. The weapon felt like part of her body now. Across the yard, black SUVs rolled slowly into view. Li Cheng had arrived.